Sadly, in the 20 years that Islamic Human Rights Commission has been around, we've seen a huge deterioration in terms of the social and emotional well-being of people around the world, and this is partly because of more and more conflict, but it's also a collapse of the idea of citizenship in all settings, really and truly, without wanting to generalize too much. And it's a very negative trajectory. I think for maybe the first 10 years we were around, we felt a bit hopeful that things could change, things could improve. It just needed some, solidarity and so on, but I think the problems are so deeply embedded in structures that it will take quite significant movements to shift them. We remain hopeful because we're believers, and you should always have hope, but things seem to need to get worse before they get better, unfortunately. Definitely in westernized settings, we are seeing the rise of the environment of hate. The hate environment has become more than just a theory or a concept. It's something palpable for people in their everyday lives. It's not even so much about on the street, although there's a rise in violence and negative emotions. It's anytime you turn on the television or read a newspaper, if you listen to a politician speaking, it's continuously negating you. Continuously negating your existence, your belief system, or sometimes not even your belief system, but you are dragged into the idea that you are part of this. You can't, whatever you do, escape. And so in that sense, the hate environment has become quite extreme in lots of different settings. Well, this is the dilemma, because ultimately the problems are structural and it requires a culture shift, and sadly now even a legal shift or legal reversal on the part of the state. So how does civil society negotiate with the state when the state doesn't want to negotiate with it? So this is the dilemma facing most of us, and ultimately the solution is long-term movement building. This is very difficult in the current climate because it's a climate of fear of any type of political mobilization that seems to be dissenting. And this is the challenge that faces us. We have to be brave. We have to not just make alliances, but actually stand on a common platform. And that requires bravery, because at the moment, the state is clamping down on all forms of political dissent, not just so-called Muslim grievances. It needs to be done. It's beginning to be done, but there's a long way to go. Because we've had a mobilization in the last couple of years, generally being dissatisfied with the political establishment, we've had attempts. So we have positive narratives, counter-narratives, that humanizes people, that talks about the sanctity of life of every person, and with specific references also to different types of racism and other forms of discrimination. The problems are, of course, that the state is not happily going to allow that to re-enter the political space, but it's happening. It's a slow push, but there's always a pushback. So, for example, where we've had mobilization around the issue of Palestine as part of these movements, you find a lot of attacks, for example, on the new leadership of the Labour Party as being anti-Semitic and so on and so forth. And it's a very negative tactic for two reasons. One is it's obviously untrue, but secondly, it sort of delegitimizes proper, issues around anti-Semitism, which are on the rise. Okay, and by creating this distraction, it actually creates problems for those struggling for justice, and very specifically for the fight against anti-Semitism. Social media has its uses, and it's good for making connections and keeping connections. You have to be careful, however, that sometimes we live in the bubble of social media, so we are always talking to people that we are agreeing with, and you get a bit of a distorted picture of what's going on out there. And if you actually look at how social media is being mobilized by the far right, actually, in the UK, this is a very new phenomenon to have so much mobilization of the far right. It's actually quite scary. So it's double-edged. Yes, we can use it and we should use it, but we need to also be aware that it can give you a fictitious sense of achievement when actually much worse things are happening. I think it has to be brave in the face of adversity, and I can't emphasize it enough. Really, it should be our leaders who are brave and taking the strong decisions, and I don't blame anyone as an individual or within communities who feel scared and don't take a stand, but definitely if we can, we have to tell our children that the compromises we end up making are often counterproductive and self-defeating. So try and be brave and make sure you are in alliances. You are always showing love and mercy to people who are in similar situations, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together.